I'm sure you've all noticed that so many of the shops around about have their Christmas decorations up. And that could only mean one thing. We're approaching Advent. Now, I might be of the, shall we say, the bah humbug persuasion when it comes to Christmas decorations in November and perhaps especially in October. But the readings that we will hear today are definitely looking forwards. They're not looking towards Christmas, but they are looking towards Advent, the season of the church year, which begins in just a couple of weeks' time. The readings that we have this morning are readings to get us into the spirit of Advent waiting, just as I suppose the decorations in the shops are supposed to get us into the spirit of Christmas shopping. The gospel reading this morning is the last one that we are going to hear from the Gospel of Mark for a little while anyway. Mark has been the guiding gospel throughout this year, and we'll be moving on to the Gospel of Luke in our regular cycle come the beginning of Advent. Now, this reading is one of these strange, unsettling kind of readings. It's a reading in which Jesus seems to be predicting terrible events. He speaks of the destruction of the temple. But remember this, that was an event which happened at about the time that this gospel was being written. He talks of wars and earthquakes and famines. But remember this, these things were not unusual events as they might be for us. These are words written by and for people who knew these things all too well. So the message, I think, is not here is something to dread, but rather here is something you know. And terrible as it may be, in the end, all will be well. It is out of the troubles of the world that the reign of God will be born. Our Old Testament reading is rather different. It's a more personal story, and I think maybe one which will be easier for people like us to relate to. It tells the story of a woman, Hannah. She's the wife of Elkanah. She's the co-wife of Peninnah, and she's the woman who, of course, became the mother of Samuel, who turned out to be one of the greatest prophets. As we listen to the story, perhaps you'll hear echoes, little echoes of another better-known story, a story which you'll be expecting to hear in just a few weeks' time. That story draws upon this one and is shaped in some ways by it. And so we hear the story of Hannah today to prepare us to hear again the story of Mary. The story of Hannah is the beginning of a big story. A story of prophets and kings and battles. A story of pain and triumphs, of nobility and venality. A story of love and sacrifice and truth and honor, and a story with more than its fair share of sin too. And it's a story which begins in that passage which Jimmy has just read for us. It begins with the story of a woman. In many ways, just quite an ordinary woman. And why are we reading this now? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, we are preparing, in a way, to read another story, a story that we read every year, another story which also includes pain and triumphs, one that includes love and sacrifice and truth and honor, and one that is told because of human sin. And it too begins with a woman, in many ways quite an ordinary woman, a woman who, like Hannah, finds herself expecting a child in unusual circumstances, a woman who, like Hannah, sings a revolutionary song in response to the situation in which she finds herself. The story of that much later woman, Mary, differs from Hannah's story in many respects. She, for example, is not trying to get pregnant at the time the story begins. Her pregnancy has been given a super mythological makeover. Hannah's experience, though, is maybe a bit more like what many women go through: the heartbreak of being unable to have a child. And we shouldn't forget that men too can be no less affected by the pain of childlessness or by grieving the absence of children in their lives. Hannah's experience is a bit more like the experience of others. But she had things to contend with that are not so usual now. For a start, she wasn't the only wife of her husband. She lived at a time when women's security was based on being married and having children, especially sons. A childless widow or a childless unmarried woman was terribly vulnerable, having no means of support. But there are many other things in Hannah's experience which I think will resonate. She's married to a nice enough man, but he can't really help her. He tries to say something nice, but it's the wrong thing. Wrong because it reveals the vanity in him. Am I not worth 10 sons to you? He asks. You've got all you could possibly need in me. Face it, though. We are never, man or woman, everything that another person needs. Maybe Elkanah should have said rather, Hannah, you are more than 10 sons to me. Elkanah's not the only man in the story who adds to Hannah's pain. There's Eli too, the priest in the temple. Here's something which goes on all the time. A man who knows better totally misunderstands a woman. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Maybe more to one gender than the other. Eli sees a woman, probably slumped in a corner, tears on her face, her lips moving but no sound coming out. And he thinks she's drunk. And he accuses her. There's something in this which should encourage us to think about the nature of prayer and worship, especially in public. That Hannah prayed publicly in this way shows something of her courage. But why should she need to be courageous? The only reason I can come up with is because even in the context of worship, people expect to be judged. And in fact, that was her experience. She was judged by the priest. So, often, I think people come to worship when they are feeling strong enough emotionally. But they stay away when they're not feeling strong enough. And yet it is those times when we're not feeling strong that are the times when being close to God is what is most needed. We've probably all got to work at not being Eli's, not judging like he did. Worship is where the weakest should be able to come and find strength. Where the saddest should be able to come and find comfort. Where the guiltiest should be able to come and find forgiveness. Where the loneliest should be able to come and find company. And where the most troubled should be able to come and find peace. The dignity which Hannah displays in the face of Eli's accusation is humbling. Who among us could manage that? She speaks with honesty, with a depth and an openness of which Eli has shown himself quite unworthy. She confides in the man who had falsely accused her. And she tells him about the deepest pain of her life. And she challenges him not to see her as he had done, as a wicked or a worthless woman. In these words, she speaks for all people who are or ever have been regarded as worthless. No one should ever be regarded as worthless. There is a happy ending to this story. But to me, that's not so much the point. At least not for me reading it today. It is a story which hinges on what to readers of the Bible is a familiar set of circumstances, a pivotal figure in the Bible, born after a pregnancy which has been difficult or unusual in some way. The story of Jesus, born of Mary, being the ultimate example of that kind of story. But remarkable as Samuel will be, even as a child, the story is really about a remarkable woman, his mother. A woman who is faithful in the face of deepest pain. who is dignified in the face of false accusation, who is courageous enough to let her true self, her true feelings be seen in public, who has inner strength anyone should be in awe of. She's remarkable not because she is strong, though she is, but because she is not afraid of her weakness. She doesn't try to keep it hidden. She doesn't try to pretend. How many of us pretend to be strong when we're not? And does it do any good? Or does it, in fact, get in the way of what is really possible? And if that's true for individual people, might it not also be true for the church as a whole? Do we, as a church, spend too much effort trying to appear strong, when perhaps it is in weakness? Weakness to which God may actually be calling us, that our ministry may be effective. Hannah is not a role model for women. She's a role model for everyone. Her story is pivotal in the developing story of Israel's relationship with God. But Hannah was written off by Eli as worthless. And she was written off as worthless by Peninnah, her co-wife. Even her husband couldn't really tell her clearly that he valued her. But it is through the worthless in the eyes of the world that God acts so often and so decisively. Worthless people and worthless churches can change the world. Strange as it may seem, that really is God's way. Amen.